Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast, where we talk about the biggest and the best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, film editor for InBetweenDrafts.com. And from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's the news and entertainment writer over at Collider. It's Will Ashton.
Hey, John.
Will, I have a tune for you. A little song.
That, John?
I've been working on it.
What is that?
Skinamarink-a-dink-a-dink, skinamarink-a-doo. I hate this movie, and I don't want to wait to tell you it sucks a lot. I'm just kidding. I actually don't hate it. But I thought it'd be funny to, like, scare you.
I see.
Like,
did you see that?
No.
I was doing the voice of the thing at the beginning there.
Yeah, I know you were doing the voice. Like, okay. That is not lost on me. Do you think I just thought you were whispering just for the heck of it?
I don't know. Maybe you should stop doing that.
I would prefer it if you just had subtitles, no audible, vocal thing.
Sure.
Yeah. So we originally were going to talk about Magic Mike: The Last Dance.
Yeah, I saw that movie.
And yeah, you did see it. I actually want to know what you thought about it. So, but I was too busy to see it, and part of it was because I haven't seen the first two. So I would have had to binged like the first two movies and then the third one, which I was going to do. But here's the thing: I heard Magic Mike: The Last Dance kind of sucks. And so I was like, well, look, I am going to watch the first two. I couldn't bring myself to, like, I was already short on time this weekend. I did not have a lot of time. And I was like, I need to make a decision here. I need to make I need to get my priorities straight. And so instead, we're going to talk about Skinamarink, a movie that you've been trying to get me to watch for like what feels like months, basically. Might be months.
I mean, it's been probably a month since I've seen it.
You've been itching to talk about it. You wanted to do an episode around Sundance time, and we didn't do it because I couldn't get to the theater. It was one of those things where it was only playing at night, and I did not have availability at night. I could have watched it in the afternoon.
Sure.
Could have watched it early evening, but no, they decided we're going to only play it at like 7:30 at night. Like, what am I, a teenager?
And I guess out of spite, you chose to watch this like first thing in the morning.
I watched it at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday morning.
Like a maniac.
I actually think it was sufficiently creepy at that point of day. I still don't get why you don't buy into my... Like, everybody's different, Will, first of all.
Sure.
But, like, for me, movies are much creepier in the morning. And I'm not talking about the morning where the sun's shining and the birds are chirping. I'm talking about, like, the sun is still, like, playing footsie with the sky. Like, that is, for me, peak horror time. Because it's like the movie, like The Strangers. The creepiest part of that movie is in the morning. You're like, whoa, what happened here?
I mean, you do you, John. I'm not gonna, get in the way of your viewing habits.
I'm not feeling like I can do me. I feel like I got to do what you tell me to do.
I feel like this is a movie that kind of demands you see it at night, and I feel you chose to see it in the morning, kind of despite me and maybe the film. So. I don't know. I mean, I knew you were going to watch this in the morning. I told you, hey, maybe this one time, maybe you could just watch it at night.
You had goosebumps on your arms, not from the movie scaring you, but from the idea of like John watching this.
Yeah.
Like at the break of dawn.
But no, I mean, you chose to watch it when you chose to watch it. And I'll have to hear about that experience in a little bit.
Yeah. Before we talk about Skinamarink, Magic Mike: The Last Dance, I heard it's not very good, but I heard I've always heard the first two movies are quite good, especially the first one. So I do kind of want to throw it to you since you did, manage to go see it in the theater. You sat down for it. You were there for The Last Dance, in the way that I was there for Michael Jordan's The Last Dance. So yeah, where did you land with it? Was it good?
Oh, yeah, it is pretty good. I don't know why
people Why was I told it sucks?
I think it's because people had different expectations for what it was going to be, because each film, I don't know. I don't know where you stand on the consistencies of trilogies. Like, I don't know if you care if each film is different or the same. But it is kind of fascinating to watch each of these films in succession, because I rewatched the first two. And you see, like the first movie is, it's not cynical, but it is, a critique of capitalistic culture. It's an American dream story, and it's coming off of the recession, and it's talking about some stuff that was very present in the American landscape in the early 2010s. The opioid crisis comes into it.
Whoa, I don't like political movies, Will Ashton.
It's not a political film.
That I just want to eat some popcorn and turn my brain off and not think and not have an experience that the director intends. You know this.
Sure. But I mean, I think understandably the marketing for the first film kind of led people to believe it would be more of a kind of romp, more about
like stripping. A raunchy, like don't you want to see Channing Tatum and Michael McConaughey or Matthew McConaughey naked? Right. And a lot of people were like, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the first movie was, well acclaimed. It made a lot of money, but I think understandably some people were like, it's not exactly what I was expecting this to be. So Magic Mike XXL was kind of more that. It was a road show. It was a lot looser. It was a lot goofier. It was a lot more about the dancing. It was a lot, less plot focused, just kind of more of a bro ensemble piece. And I think people really responded to that. And, it didn't make nearly as much money as the first film, but it's kind of gained more of a cult following. I feel like people really have come to that movie's favor, and I can see.
There's a cult following for the Sellout movie. You don't hear that. I don't know, man.
I mean, if you look at certain corners of film Twitter, that movie really gets a lot of love and reappraisal.
I thought that was the case for the first movie, and people were like, "Second movie's good too, but not as good."
That was the initial response. I think that was the original critical response. I feel like now the tide has shifted where people prefer the second movie over the first one. And I think that was the reason why people aren't really digging this third one, is because because the first one and the third one were directed by Steven Soderbergh. He didn't direct the second one because he was on retirement, quote unquote, at that point.
Yeah, but his iPhone broke. That's why. And he's like, well, how could I? What would I use?
Yeah, I mean, but he still shot it and edited it. So I remember some people were kind of like, did he ghost direct it? Was he like kind of, like not a director in name, but like maybe had some influence? I don't really know. Rewatching Magic Mike XXL, I feel like he probably didn't direct it, but like, he was still around. But yeah, I think because this is a Soderbergh returning to this trilogy, it's more of a direct sequel to the first one. It feels like it's kind of playing more in the vein of that first movie, but also not quite as, like you said, political. I don't think it's trying to be as politically conscious as that. Yeah, not even preachy. I just feel like it's still about stuff, but I think it's not really trying to get bogged down in that. I think that was what people people who are critical of the first one, I think, tend to get a little, turned off, I guess, for a lack of a better phrase.
And you want to be turned on by Magic Mike, right? That's why
turned off by some of the
point of the movie. You don't want to get turned off. Like, that's not the show.
Sure. I think some people get kind of turned off by some of the commentary in the first one. So this one, I think it tried to kind of blend the two. And I guess for folks who, were expecting kind of more of because it's not as funny, it's not as jokey, it's not as silly, it's a lot more straightforward than the second film. So I can see why people aren't really responding to it. It's kind of fascinating to me because I feel like it's kind of similar to how people felt with like Ocean's 12 after Ocean's 11, where I don't know if you... Yeah,
I think is I don't usually say this. I think that it's annoying to say things are overrated and underrated, but Ocean's 12 I think is like one of the few examples where like, yeah, I could buy saying that that's underrated.
But I don't know. I mean,
underestimated.
I certainly don't like Ocean's 12 as much as Ocean's 11, but I can see why Soderbergh was just kind of like, I don't want to like just do that all over again. I want to kind of do something different. And I
respect it for that.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the case here. He wanted to do something that was pretty drastically different than the first two films. And I mean, at the end of the day, these are all movies about like honoring female pleasure, about, kind of seeing guys working through this oppressive economic system, but finding ways to give people joy and pleasure at times of, sorrow or economic grief. And yeah, I mean, it's this one. I don't know. I don't know where I'd compare it to the first two films because I'm still fresh on it, but I had a good time. I enjoyed it. It was funny to see this in Dolby because it was going to go to HBO Max originally. And then Warner Brothers is now trying to get as much money as they can because they're hemorrhaging money. So they're just like, well, we're not going to make any money if we put this on HBO Max. Just put it in theaters and whoever sees it will see it, but we'll make some money as opposed to no money. So I went from seeing it either on my computer or on my TV to seeing it on like one of the biggest screens I could. And I didn't think it suffered for it. I mean, I think it looks very nice. And it was nice to see a Soderbergh movie on the big screen again because it's been good while. I think the last one was
let them all talk on the move. Those are Amazon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I would recommend it, man.
All right. Well, I'm probably not going to be able to watch it on the plane.
I imagine not.
Any of the Magic Mike movies, probably. And yeah, for the listeners who don't know, we're recording this right before I'm going to be traveling. So I'm going to be going to some new countries and I'm going to be traveling the world a little bit. So I'm going to be gone for a while. We're recording next week's episode ahead of time, but there's going to be a week where Will's running the show. I still don't know what he's going to do. He might, just do a monologue, just him by himself reviewing who knows what the hell.
That would be the week of Cocaine Bear, right?
Oh man. I hope you could pick a really good guest for that. And you've talked about maybe doing some bonuses if time permits.
Sure, I want to do a bonus for Magic Mike if I can.
I mean, look, when I'm walking around Japan, I want to plug in Cinemaholics, and I want to see what's the latest, and that'll be much easier to do if you have an episode out that I got to get clued in. I got to know what this Cocaine Bear is up to. Like, what kind of bear is it again? But yeah. By the way, you're in good company with Magic Mike: The Last Dance. I took a quick look at the Rotten Tomatoes, and Isaac Feldberg, friend of the show, also is a fan. So, hey, look, maybe I just I was looking in the wrong corners of the internet for opinions, clearly. And the score, like on Rotten Tomatoes, to be clear, is pretty low. It's like in the 40s.
That's what I've heard. Yeah. I don't know. It's the first like negative Soderbergh movie. Well, actually, that's not true because I think The Laundromat was also negative, and I think this is certainly better than The Laundromat. Yeah, that was, I don't know. I think I'm mostly in line with Soderbergh. Like, even if I don't love his films, I tend to, appreciate them in some way or another. Laundromat was one of the ones where I'm just like, this was a whiff.
I don't even think I finished that one. I think I was a big fan of No Sudden Move, but of his recent stuff. Yeah. And I liked Kimmy too. Kimmy was, yeah, that was a solid one. And High Flying Bird was quite good as well. So yeah, he's made some good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was more favorable on Let Them All Talk than you.
I know you were. And yeah, we don't see eye to eye on that one.
I guess. I don't know. I feel like I like No Sudden Move. I feel it's also kind of forgettable to me. I did enjoy Kimmy though. I was pleasantly taken by that one.
That's enough though. That's enough of Magic Mike: The Last Dance and Steven Soderbergh. Yeah, we gotta move on. We gotta talk about this movie here. So, I
was just gonna say it's appropriate that you brought up Isaac Feldberg because I was gonna reach out to him initially while you were at Sundance to review this film because I know he was a big fan of it. I think he talked to the director as well. So
yeah, we have a few friends of the show did see Skinamarink and had some interesting thoughts on it. I actually watched, I'll plug Man of the Jedi's review of Skinamarink today.
Oh, okay.
Because I was kind of curious what she thought because I saw her tweeting about it. Yeah, I was
gonna say she didn't like it, right? From what I can tell,
she was mixed. She was kind of like, I like what this movie's going for. Yeah. I'm ready to talk about it. I got a lot to say.
It's a divisive film. I guess
it's divisive, it's polarizing, and which is a good sign, I think, because for me, divisive, polarizing horror is usually like that's what I want. Because even if I don't end up liking it, something good usually tends to come out of divisive, polarizing horror movies in terms of like what they influence, and also I think the conversation and the discourse tends to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the divisive reviews are fascinating because of kind of the little engine that could story behind the film. I don't know if you're as familiar with like what kind of happened as this movie was getting released.
Yeah, I read up on it quite a bit. And you'll know that I did once you see my Letterboxd review, which I plugged in right before we started. But
yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is similar to what you heard, but basically this movie was, I guess, made during the pandemic, and it initially premiered at a
and
horror
it puts
festival.
It out there like in the beginning. It's like, hey, yeah, we made this. We were following COVID-19 guidelines.
Right.
It was literally shot in Kyle Edward Ball's like childhood home.
Yes. I'm very, very micro budget film. Like
$15,000.
$15,000, yeah.
And it's
which
$15,000. And do you know what the latest box office is?
Like probably 4 million.
2 million. Not that
2 million?
much.
Okay.
Jeez, calm down.
All right. It's not
all right. It would probably be 4 million if it hadn't leaked. But also, if it hadn't leaked, it probably wouldn't have become a viral sensation.
Anyway, yeah, you kind of jumped ahead of me there a little bit, but initially, this premiered at a horror festival, online only. There was some sort of glitch
Fantasia
or malfunction.
Film Festival, not
was
to
it
be
Fantasia?
confused with Fantastic Fest. Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was a smaller film festival that this happened in. But
the Fantasia Film Festival is because this is a Canadian movie, and this was that festival happens, I think, in Montreal.
But yeah, I mean, there was some sort of glitch or some sort of malfunction, and the movie was able to be downloaded and subsequently pirated pretty heavily, which became sort of a curse and a blessing for the film, because obviously a lot of people saw it before the filmmaker wanted it to be seen, but it did drum up a lot of interest and attention for the film. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the filmmaker is like an online content creator. I don't know if they're a YouTuber per se.
He's
but
a
I know
Redditor.
they make Redditor. Okay.
I know there was like a Reddit thing that he did where people would like submit their nightmares to him, and he would make short films based on people's nightmares.
Yeah, I mean, that actually kind of leads into something I was going to say about the film, but I'll talk about that in a bit. But I will say that later. Yeah.
Presto changeo.
But yeah, I mean, I think he was tech savvy enough to kind of, lean into that building audience and the people who are aware of it, because like you said, like he was using social media, especially TikTok, to kind of drum up, or it was a mix of that and like people were, generally taking clips from the film and, sparking up interest away from him. But in any case, it became a sort of online phenomenon before it even came out. And Shudder just used that to give it a sort of modest but enthusiastic theatrical release, and I think it well exceeded their expectations, because there was this genuine word of mouth, and the horror community obviously is very vocal and very in tune to like these kind of smaller movies that drum up a lot of interest and notoriety and controversy. So I mean,
it's just a really cool story.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big thing for me, is that that's one of the main reasons I want to talk about it, because I just think it's so neat that a movie like this was able to kind of beat the odds and get so much notice and interest. But as we're kind of alluding to, I feel like that's kind of, helping and hurting the film in some respect.
I was going to say, because there is a dark side to this, because this could end kind of in a similar way of like what happened at TikTok, like what happened with books in TikTok. So some listeners might be aware of this, but there's something called Book Talk, where there have been like basically authors who have been like writing these books and self-publishing them in a lot of cases, and people on TikTok get a hold of them and they become viral sensations. And like we saw this kind of like wave, particularly over the pandemic, mostly like in 2020, 2021. And it was just this like really exciting thing, because like people were discovering books that came out like over a decade ago, and these authors were getting this like wave of attention for like these kind of independent books that like just didn't find the readership that they wanted. And TikTok and Book Talk, it was starting to like subvert the market. It was starting to like become like, wow, this is a really great way to bring attention to books in a more direct way, in a more entertaining way, especially to the Gen Z in particular, Gen Alpha, like the people coming up who are mostly using those apps. The dark side is that really in the last year, we've seen Book Talk just implode in terms of like, it's been co-opted in a lot of ways. It's been co-opted by these like savvy marketing teams that are trying to break the system and like drum up like force and manipulate TikTok to start to like come up with these like fake sensations. And what's happening is that people are relying on TikTokers less and less for media recommendations for books. And that could happen with movies too. It could lead to some things like being built upon like, oh, we're going to do this big TikTok campaign and we're going to do something really cringy to make this movie happen that's super indie. So I'm kind of dreading that. It could be years away for all I know. It could never happen. But I do think that there are a lot of producers, a lot of Hollywood folks out there right now, all over the world, really, who are looking at what happened with this movie and are like, this is our moment, and so keep your eyes on that, because it's not something I fully like gravitate toward. I don't use TikTok. I don't, I don't really like follow creators who like do the sort of bite size, like I watched this movie and it scared the what out of me. And like, I feel like that's more of like the next generation thing. I feel like I'm just, I'm sharing Family Guy clips with Matt Serafini. That's where I'm at. Like, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm going to choose to be a little bit more optimistic about this because, I feel like initially, like something like this, and it doesn't quite match it, but I mean, it's easy to kind of look at the phenomenon of this and compare it to like the Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity, and it feels like it's something that can be kind of more common than it was then, because the internet can, drum up a lot of interest very quickly and very prominently. But, I mean, in that same respect, interest can kind of wane a lot quicker too. And you kind of have to take advantage of the moment when it comes. Like, I feel like people are already kind of starting to move on from Skinamarink, which is why our review's a little late. But I mean, I'm already kind of seeing this with another horror movie that's coming up, The Outwaters. I don't know if you've heard about that one, but it seems to be kind of drumming up some similar tension. I don't know if it's the case with TikTok or on social media as much, but I mean, it's just it's an exciting time for horror in general, but I'm really excited for films like Skinamarink to break into the popular conversation and drum up a lot of interest for these very modest but very intriguing films.
Yeah, it's an exciting time if you're somebody who likes to use new tech, and in interesting creative ways. Outwaters, by the way, if you're a Bay Area listener, it's playing at the Alamo Drafthouse in San Francisco this weekend. So might want to catch a late showing if you're a local listener, at least in my neck of the woods. I don't know about Pittsburgh. I don't know what's going on in PA.
We might have some information soon. If I may say so anyway. Myself.
So let's set this movie up.
Yeah, I was going to say, what did you know going into this film?
Very little. Well, so we did publish a review of Skinamarink on In Between Drafts. I kind of like half edited it because I was literally like traveling at the time. I was going to LA, and so I was like trying to do it at the airport, and a writer was struggling to like find images for the movie. Like, we didn't get like a press kit or anything. It was kind of tough to like just because like we source our images straight from the studio. And the writer, by the way, is Yasmin Kleinbart, who did our Skinamarink review. And she graded it a 7 out of 10. She liked it. But at the time, it was playing select theaters, and so like I had a hard time. Like I was on like the Shudder website. I was like reaching out to like IFC Films or IFC Midnight people that I knew, because I was like, hey, I need help. I don't have anything for this movie, and we want to show an image of the movie. Part of the reason that it's hard to get like a photo credit is because, and I got this sense, like once I did look at the images, I was like, are there no people in this movie? I'm seeing feet. I'm seeing walls and TVs, and I was like, oh, this is something really experimental. I kind of read through part of the review, but I didn't want to get spoiled on anything, because at the time I was like, oh, we might be doing a review, and I like to stay fresh on watching this stuff. So I just kind of did some aesthetic editing, and then someone else finished it up for me. But our reviews editor, Aaron Brady. But anyway, the movie itself, I got the sense that it was like, okay, we're doing something kind of weird here with like color. The atmosphere is very creepy, and it's probably going to be like a very unconventional horror movie. That's about all I knew going in. And I knew it was like micro budget, hyper indie, and it was like a big like TikTok thing. Like, that's basically all I knew.
Yeah, I mean, it is, to me, especially seeing the film, really fascinating that this got a pretty wide release, like that this played in chain theaters and stuff, because it feels like sort of the antithesis of anything that you'd see at your local cinema. Like, it's kind of fascinating to me that someone, if this was still playing in theaters now, like they could go from like Ant-Man the Wasp to like this.
I mean, it was playing in I just looked it up, about 700 theaters.
Yeah.
And 2 million is pretty good for that. Not amazing, but good.
No, but I mean, that's like, I'm sure the director was never expecting this film to play in 700 theaters, which is, again, kind of adding to this kind of remarkable story that's been, continuing to build with this film. But yeah, I mean, like we said, I don't know if that's playing to the film's benefit or to its detriment that it's getting that many eyes and that many people, I think, expecting something a little bit different from this.
Really?
Perhaps.
I mean, I didn't know what to expect, but I certainly I kind of got it. Like, as soon as the movie started and I was like, oh, this is that kind of movie, I was like, this is what the deal is. It wasn't like a huge surprise. It wasn't a huge, like, what the heck? I was like, okay, yeah. And I think the thing I messaged you was like, is this a movie or a MoMA exhibit? And I stand by that. Because it's like, it's the most pretentious, unpretentious, like, experimental horror film I think I've ever seen. Like, it genuinely. And I think it's like, it's one of those things where as I'm watching it, I'm like, man, I really want to meet the guy who made this. He's probably really cool. He's like probably a really cool dude. And it's I'm really curious too, because he apparently did like a proof of concept thing for this beforehand called Heck, where he had like, cause, filming this in his childhood home was like not accidental. Like, this was a nightmare that he had, and he says that like he had shared that nightmare with other people about like basically these kids are like running around this house at night and there's like a monster or something and they can't escape the house. And as the film proceeds, like you kind of get ideas of what's happening, but you only ever see the walls. You only ever see part of the TV. Everything's always a bit distorted and out of frame. And it's all about the ambiance and the lighting. And it kind of is like being inside somebody else's nightmare, but not nightmare in the way that spectacle usually like drums up, where everything's like all of a sudden like monsters and it's wild and like, look at that. And this character, it's like way more abstract, honestly. And that's where the polarization comes in, because people are watching that, and I think, understandably so, are extremely bored while watching this movie. Because I'll say it's kind of boring. I think it's really interesting, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, I really admire what's going on here. I kept going with it, but I was like, this is kind of boring. This is kind of taking too long. This should be like 80 minutes, not 100. Maybe even fewer than that. And I think the idea, and Amanda the Jedi said this in her video, where she was kind of thinking the same thing, but she was saying like, there could be this argument of like part of the movie is like it's long because it should feel like you can't escape from the nightmare, which I think is an interesting take. But I did want to escape throughout. When it ended, I was like, thank God, finally. But I did find it pretty creepy. Yeah, but I take it you like this one more than me. That's my guess.
I would say that's correct. Yeah, I mean, I was fascinated to get your perspective on it because I think it was good that, one of us saw in theaters and one of us saw at home. Because, I don't know, I've been getting the sense that, not only have a lot of people been seeing it at home because of the leak and the fact that it's on Shudder now, but because I think people are kind of thinking like, oh, this is a movie, kind of similar Paranormal Activity. It's like at home. Maybe it's more creepy at home, all that jazz. And I don't know. I definitely get that impression from, watching the Paranormal Activity movies. I tend to prefer them at home. I think they're a little bit more effective with the ambiance of being in your house. And to some respects, I feel that way about Blair Witch Project. I think this movie actually benefits from seeing it in a theater.
Because you can't get out and you're surrounded by other people.
Well, not only that, but I think it's a film that you need to kind of give yourself to. Like you said, like I think you're going to get as much out of it as you want to get out of it in some respects.
Which is why I saw it in the morning. Because look, in the morning, no distractions. Nobody's awake. And it's, sure. And again, we're talking like 6 a.m. Like it's dark. And I'm certainly, there's some light. So I'm seeing like trick of the light and stuff. It was pretty unsettling. It was pretty creepy. If I had watched this at midnight, I wouldn't have been creeped out. People are awake. It's the night. It's like it's nightlife. I don't know.
Whatever gets you into the mood of the film, but I think
so dismissive.
I think it's a type of film that, like you said, like the beginning, it's a little slow going, You're not really exactly sure where it's going. It's a lot of static shots of, walls and doors and, like you said, people's feet and feet and arms. And you're not really getting a lot of, information head on. And it's an easy film to kind of tune out or pause or check your phone during. And I think it's much better if you just kind of let that all go and just accept it on its own terms and watch it, which I think is easier
better when
for
you're
me.
A captive audience.
Sure. I think it's easier for me to do that in a theater. So I was definitely very appreciative that it got the theatrical release that it got, and I was fortunate that I watched it in art house theater. So I feel like my audience was actually pretty respectful. One of the reasons I brought up the divisive response, I feel like part of the reason people are maybe getting less out of this because they see it with a full audience of people, and half the audience is getting kind of restless and making jokes during it and probably taking away from their experience. So it's definitely an understandable film for I can see why some people aren't going to like it. I'm not saying that everyone who dislikes it wasn't trying to get something out of it, but it's a type of film where if you want to go into this not liking it or thinking it's stupid, it's very easy to do so. I think it's more interesting to actually kind of approach it head on and get immersed into it. And I think if you do so, it is a pretty genuinely evocative and creepy film. For me, though, I guess when I got out of it, part of my thinking was this, is it trying to say something deeper, or is it more just kind of a, concept piece where it's more about proving itself and being a calling card for the director to prove their talents and then do something later. I'm not exactly sure which both? It is. I think it's a little bit of both. I think there is something.
I don't think it's trying to say anything all that deep. I think this is one of those cases where maybe what it's saying is, I just think Ball is getting something off of his chest, a deep-rooted anxiety, a fear, a sort of lack of connection that he has to his childhood and the fear he had as a child and how it's so different from the fear of being an adult, and him just sort of getting that out there. I feel it. I feel the honesty in it. And that's why I admired this movie a lot. And while I was watching it, I was responding to it. I just was a little bit okay, we showed this wall already several times. And it's I get it. The toilet sometimes isn't there. That's interesting. Okay. But do something else, please. And eventually it does. There are some things that happen midpoint and toward the end where I'm just what the heck? This is now we're getting somewhere. Now we're doing something. There's a particular scene where series of scenes that happens close to the end where I was genuinely whoa, this is going a lot harder. I was starting to think that it was never going to actually do anything. And it does, to its credit.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think this movie taps into that childlike mindset you're referring to in a way that I feel other filmmakers have. And I mean, some have been successful, but I feel a lot of them haven't really gotten me into that place in this way. In the way that when you are a kid and you happen to wake up at 2:30 a.m. and you're roaming the house and you figure your parents are in the other room, but and you recognize the place, but it's also different, and you just can't, really make heads or tails of it. And I just feel a lot of movies haven't been able to capture that feel and mood as effectively as this film does. And I think that's what I really admire about it, is that it really does dive head on into being evocative in that way and capturing that aesthetic and doing so in a way that feels, like you said, very purposeful and maybe even kind of cathartic for the filmmaker. But I can see why some folks would want to kind of write that off as being, empty or
too experimental. Just make a movie, and which I'm sympathetic to. But at the same time, I mean, I certainly have a very easy personal in with this because it takes place in 1995, which I'm not sure if we even mentioned. And so everything in the movie is very nostalgic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
And I would say so the one of the kids in it, the boy, is a younger brother, and he's 4 years old in 1995, and he has a sister, an older sister, who's a couple years older than him. That, and also kind of the very vague look of the house, which makes it so that you could read that house into all kinds of like your own house. Like I certainly was like seeing my like childhood there. Like I was seeing those like blocks that I would play with. I was seeing those like, you know, kind of creepy old cartoons that it was like the only thing that would be on, and kind of like following my sister around and being kind of scared if something was going on with our parents. Like even things going on with like, you know, I can't find something and it's too dark, but feeling like the living room is kind of a safe haven. Like all that stuff. I was like, wow, yeah, sure. I'm there with you. But I still felt a little bit limited from really enjoying it, because again, it just kind of spun its wheels a little bit, and I think it was doing it on purpose, but I don't think all that successfully for me. And genuinely, like there are people who are like, this is like the creepiest movie I've ever seen. Like that's kind of the hyperbole people were saying on TikTok, because it's TikTok, and I think it's far from that. I certainly was not like, you know, freaking out. Like I wasn't sort of like, oh man, I have to go into work today, but I'm so scared.
Okay, so what I thought you were going to do was you're like, okay, it's 1995, and I'm seeing some kids and some toys.
Yeah.
And I'm the author
Toy
of the
Story?
Pixar theory. You know what that means? This is a Toy Story.
This is a horror Toy Story movie.
Yeah.
Toy Story should have like a horror. If they're gonna do Toy Story 5, make it a horror movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why do we need Toy Story 5 when we got Skinamarink?
There you go.
You got a friend.
There's even a character from Toy Story 3 in Skinamarink, but I won't give it away.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I am similar to what you said about Man and the Jedi, where I think the movie needed to be that long because it's about kind of getting displaced and feeling as though like you don't really know where you are and how much time has passed. And, you know, getting into that kind of creeped out mindset, I think it's very deliberate and very intentional. I think that's much easier, like I said, in a theater when you're not checking your phone and you don't really know how much time has passed. You don't know how long you've been looking at the wall. And yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of the key to this film's power. And I can see if you're watching at home, you can like look at your, you know, your watch or your clock and you can see how much time has passed or whatever. But yeah, I think that's why you kind of need to be immersed in it. I know that that's not a way everyone's going to be able to see the film, but I think that's kind of key to it being as effective as it can be.
Since I feel like we're kind of wrapping up here, don't have too much else to say myself. I want to mention Matt Donato, friend of the show, also reviewed the film for Slash Film, which my heart goes out, by the way. I know Slash Film had a bunch of layoffs today, and so affected some people I care about. Pretty upsetting. But regardless, Matt wrote in his review that he also thought that it was a bit too long, but he called it exquisitely divisive, the kind of film that will balance 0 and 5-star reviews. That said, those seeking an abstract exploration of lights out anxieties by lo-fi means should seek this shot on film looking curiosity that abides by no conventional filmmaking rules. And he's kind of right about that, because like it is shot on digital, but it does kind of have that like aesthetic, like where you could easily be like, oh yeah, that might have been shot on 35 millimeter, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very deliberate in its look and style. But yeah, I mean, what I meant to say earlier is, I mean, I don't know what the filmmaker has in store next, but I feel like their calling card is to do some sort of film about sleep paralysis. Like, I feel like that would be like, I don't know. I just felt like there's a lot of scenes in here. I'm not someone who like often suffers from sleep paralysis, but whenever I do, I feel like it's been similar to some of the images that you see in this film. And I don't know. I feel like that's like the dream there, you know, or the nightmare, as it were.
Well, it's interesting because I was reading, because I wasn't aware of Ball before this, but he said that one of his main influences is Chantal Akerman, and you know, Gene Dealman, of course, like apparently is not the best movie of all time according to certain lists, and it is kind of interesting because like, you know, Ackerman's films were a lot like that. Gene Dealman in particular, just sort of like using an extended sequence to deliver a very simple point in an uncomfortable way, but on purpose. And so, I kind of see that. I kind of see him in his next movie, you know, kind of staying true to that and using something like, you know, what is a very not realistic, but sort of like an experimental way to display sleep paralysis or insomnia or something that can kind of like really scratch that itch. Cause that's a good horror thing to poke at. I'm sick of horror movies about grief. I don't need horror movies about grief. I like that this movie isn't like, this is a horror movie about divorce or a horror movie about one parent leaving. Like, you can read into that, but it's doing more. It's kind of being a little bit more like elemental about its fears instead of just telling you what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think been a big part of its appeal is that it's kind of going back to the basics, where I feel like a lot of these horror movies are trying to, either be like ironic or cute, going off the influence of Scream, or, like you said, like kind of like laying the metaphor on thick, or, make it very obvious what it's trying to say, and therefore, maybe earn more critical appraisal. But yeah, I think that this movie, I would certainly love to see more movies like this that honor that sort of ambiguity, that kind of play into, a number of things, but don't mix it so apparent and obvious throughout, and don't have like leaden dialogue that just explains the whole point of the film. And I say that kind of ironically after I praise Doc at the Cabin, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose.
All right. It's definitely one of those movies where I personally like talking about it and thinking about it more than I like watching it, but I didn't see it in the theater. I don't know if it would have been better. I do think that, watching it at home had its own appeal. I think like the first Paranormal Activity, I saw that in the theater, and I think that was the best way to watch it for me. Part of it was because it was an empty theater. It was kind of creepy. It was a midnight showing on like a Thursday, and it was just me and my girlfriend at the time, and there were two other people in the theater, but it was a big theater. And at the very end of the movie, like I think one of the guys was just like, "Oh hell no!" It was something like that, where it was like really funny, and that was an experience. That was like okay, cool, like that was fun.
Did my ears deceive me, or did you say you watched a horror film at midnight?
I was young and stupid.
Oh, wow.
Well, hey, look, Paranormal Activity 3, which I think is my favorite and probably the best Paranormal Activity movie. Agreed. I did see that at home. I saw that at a friend's house.
I saw that one in theaters. See, I saw the first Paranormal Activity at home, so we were topsy-turvy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what was going on there. Although I don't know if it might have been the second time I watched it. I don't remember. But I saw it with like a group of friends. And it was like, that was like 2 a.m. And that was pretty sick. That's a good one to watch at home. Yeah,
I definitely think this movie is creepy, though. I think you're underselling the spookiness of it. But, I don't know. I found it to be pretty chilling.
Well, let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. Let's see what other critics have to say.
Before I forget, my friend Jess, and I, when we saw the film, we made these bingo cards I wanted to show you.
Bingo card.
Yeah,
there's
we
an
made
actual bingo card here.
We were trying to predict what would happen in the film. Neither of us got bingo, but I got pretty close.
Did you get close?
Yeah. I can read you some of the things I predicted would or wouldn't happen in the film.
Know.
I won't specify which happen or which don't happen if anyone hasn't seen the film yet. But I wrote kid cries, cat, kid says creepy shit. We see the monster. TV in the background playing old 70s show. We thought it was going to be in the 70s. We were a little mistaken there. Creep
it kind of
noise.
looks like the 70s.
Someone says Skinamarink. Basement. Something flies at the screen. Police shows up. Door closes by itself. People walk out of the theater. Movie starts. That was the centerpiece. Abrupt end. Audience makes rude comments. Jump scare. Kid yells for parents. Child toy makes loud noise. Sinister closet. Someone dies. Only see parents' feet. Ball rolling in the dark. Demon voice. Dead animal. And 70s pop culture reference. Again, thinking that this movie took place in the 70s.
I'm kind of surprised you didn't get bingo. A lot of those were pretty good. Almost spot on.
Well, it didn't work out. Do you want to hear some of hers, or do you want to go on to Rotten Tomatoes game?
Let's play the game. Yeah. Let's let the listeners wonder.
All right.
We have 110 reviews counted. So, Will, what is your guess for the Rotten Tomatoes score? I assume you have not been spoiled on it.
No, I don't think I have. I have been spoiled for next week's episode, but we can talk about that in a bit. Okay. This one, that's interesting. I think this is going to get... I can see this being very lopsided as far as like critics are probably very favorable on this one. Audience is probably mixed and negative. But I'm going to say critic score is 75%.
Hey, that's not far. It's not far. It's just a little bit lower. Just a little bit lower. Do you think it's in the upper 60s or low 70s?
I'm going to say 69. Nice.
Nah, 71. You went with not your head or your heart. You went with the other thing. 71%, which is pretty good especially for something so divisive. What about the audience score? We have 100 plus verified ratings. What's your guess there?
I'm going to imagine it's pretty low, but not like astronomically low, but just low compared to the critic score. I'm going to say 46%. 46? That's actually not far either. So you're 2 off. You think it's 48 or 44? I'm going to say 44.
It's 44. You were pessimistic, and I get it. We don't have a cinema score for this one, but we do have Letterboxd, of course. 80,000 watches. That's the highest we've had actually in a little bit. Like I don't think Infinity Pool had that much. I think that's around what Knock at the Cabin had when we reviewed it. But okay, on Letterboxd.com, out of 5, what do you think the average rating is?
I'm going to say 3.4.
3.4 is your guess. Not 3.0. 3.0.
Oh, okay.
See, there's a little bit. The Letterboxd community, they're not all singing Skinamarink-a-dink-a-doo. Some of them are telling this movie to shut up.
Well, it seems like this one, it's been kind of a Letterboxd favorite, right? Like a lot of people have been logging in on Letterboxd.
I mean, that's what I'm seeing. Lots of hearts and everything. But I'm seeing just on my friends list, I'm seeing some 2s, 2.5s, but also lots of 4s and 3.5. So yeah, pick your poison. But that'll do it for this week's episode of Cinemaholics. Thanks so much for listening. And thanks so much for all of you who do watch movies, horror movies in the morning, and you sat through this and you grit your teeth against Will Ashton's harsh judgments. I get it. I'm right there with you. But what are you going to do? We can't change him. He can't change us. And that's how it's going to have to stay. So yeah, from the Internet, California, I'm John Gurney.
And again, people can enjoy the films however they want, despite my judgment and reservations. And for the Internet, Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.